to 2021 and UX Evenings with Google. I'm so happy that you joined us here tonight. Tonight, we've got a pretty cool setup in front of us that's going to talk about UX career development. We're joined by three great UX leaders who are going to tell you about different perspectives about UX careers at different phases. So I hope there'll be practical tips for you to take away and lots of opportunities. At the end of our session of the lectures, there'll also be a live question and answer with all the presenters. So please drop in those questions and answers. Just as we're getting started though, I'd love to see here in the comments, tell us hello, where you're from, and maybe one thing you're hoping to get out of the session. We're really excited to get to know you. So first off, hi, I'm Julie Schiller. I lead UX community and culture in Asia Pacific. And this is a really great chance for us to share with you some insights and ideas, and we'll continue this series quarterly. If you'd like to see past episodes, you can go to our YouTube channel and follow us there on Google Design. Our first presenter tonight is going to be Rob Yeomans. He is a director of research and design here at Alphabet, at Google, and YouTube. He currently directs the user experience team for YouTube's European offices and builds many YouTube creative-facing products. Before he joined Alphabet, Rob was the CEO of a small travel startup and a director of creative design and user experience at George Mason University, an assistant professor, and he worked in many different universities and authored over 50 scientific articles on design, cognition, cognitive flexibility, and UX education. Rob has a PhD in cognitive psychology and a doctoral minor in industrial design from the University of Illinois, Chicago, and an MA in experimental psychology. And he was awarded in 2003 at Wake Forest University for his research on human decision making. You can also follow Rob if you want at Robert J. Yeomans. And always you can hashtag us at #UXEvenings. Rob's going to talk to us a little bit about the senior part of his career, how he made that transition, and also a little bit more about how you might be able to make that transition yourself. As always, please put your comments in, questions you'd like to hear from Rob and the other presenters at the end. We're really excited to get to hear from you. All right, let's get Rob on the line now.
Hey, Julie. Thank you so much for inviting me to this event. It's a real honor to be here. My background, well, I have a background in design and psychology. My PhD is in experimental psychology, and I studied cognition specifically. And I would say my background has had three distinct periods, three phases, if you will, three story arcs. I started out as a scientist, an educator, a professor, and I spent almost all my time writing papers like this one, publishing book chapters and teaching. And I loved it, and I loved my students, and that was a very exciting part of my life. Second phase of my career has been in sort of entrepreneurship. I started a UX consulting firm. I did a couple of startups, a travel app, and if there's an object that encapsulates that period of my life, it's this one. I spent a lot of time on the design and improvement of television remote controls. Third phase of my life has been where I am now at Alphabet. Specifically, I'm a UX director at YouTube. Here's some tube socks from YouTube. And I lead a design and research team that builds tools for creators, YouTube creators.
So tell us a little more about your current role and maybe how it's changed as a director from your past roles.
Different from my past roles. Well, in a lot of ways, I suppose. I guess I've come to look at my job as a director as there's three parts to it. The first is the two V's, vision and values. That's something that a leader needs to bring to an organization that's as complicated as mine to be successful. So by vision, I mean I spend a fair amount of my time reminding people that YouTube is a force for good in the world. And I firmly believe that to my core. We do a lot of good in a lot of places. And setting that vision and reminding folks of that is important. As for values go, you have to, as a leader, think about what you want the values of your organization to be. For me, they are psychological safety, taking risks, entrepreneurship, and rigor. So I suppose I've brought some aspects of my previous roles to this one in that way. Second thing, and this is going to sound funny, but part of being a good director is actually letting go of skills, oftentimes skills that you hold very dear. I used to be a terrific statistician, and now I've got 10 people on my team that are better at it than I am. I used to be pretty good with SolidWorks, a design program. Same thing. I'm probably the worst designer on my team at this point. So when it comes to letting things go, it's important that you can do that as a leader, and let the folks that are the true professionals, which are the people on your team, do those roles, and not be tempted to micromanage. The third thing that I would say is different about being a director is related to the letting go of skills. It can be really intimidating to be in a kind of a high level position in a company. I was terrified when I got the role. I thought I was in over my head. And one of the things that I've returned to time and again that makes me feel better, not perfect, but better, when I feel, oh my gosh, what am I going to do, is reminding myself that above all other values, I guess, I feel that my role is one of a servant leader. I'm here to make my team shine and the folks on my team succeed, and give them career paths and make them know that they're welcome on the team.
Well, I think the comments coming in really do show that people are excited about what you're talking about. Maybe tell us a little bit about, people have asked us in the past to think about how to grow into careers leading UX at their company or their university. So what are some key skills that someone should focus on when they're when they're currently maybe leading a smaller team and they want to move up to leading the whole organization? Could you name a few skills that you think they could focus on?
Skills for growth. Sure. One thing I would say is this reminds me of a study that me and a few other researchers ran a couple of years back. And what the study did was it asked students in human factors programs, feeder programs for UX, what skills they thought that they would be using when they became a professional in the UX industry. And they'd say things like, exotic statistics like Bayesian statistics, or eye tracking, or things like that. Things that basically nobody seems to ever actually use. And that was interesting, but the most interesting finding was that between professionals and students, the thing that students got wrong the most was they undervalued the importance of being able to communicate. So I know students do talks at conferences and things like that, but day to day, as an executive, as you're growing, really your communication skills are hugely, hugely important. And I think people fail to realize just how important, actually. That's true for students, and I think that's true for ICs in early career. It's just true all the way up the chain. So one thing that I would stress is that the importance of being able to communicate well, to communicate research findings, to communicate ideas, to communicate about design. I can never stress that enough. Second thing I would say is, you're wanting to grow your career, you want to move up. It's learning, quite frankly. Because there's things that you're going to need to learn about your roles that you desire to be in that you probably don't currently have. Even if you're really anxious to get that next promotion or move into that next role, you really need to prepare well for that. Some of the things I would recommend are, good old-fashioned reading. Actually, a book I would recommend for folks that are trying to climb is this one, a book called Liftoff, which is about design leadership and elevating your team. Really good book by Chris Vore and Russ Unger. Highly recommended by me. The third thing, and maybe this is going back to my entrepreneurial days, but it's important as you're trying to grow your career to be able to make a pitch. I got my current role by essentially pitching it to a vice president at Google. We were coming back from an offsite, and we were on a tour bus, and I had been thinking about this office that I'm in now, the Zurich office, and it needed, I thought, a strong leader here in Zurich. And so I told him about my ideas and kind of pitched that to him. And it wasn't right away that he said yes. It took actually probably 6 months and a lot of conversation and a lot of support from my then manager and other leaders in the company, people I consider friends, to kind of make it work. But it started with that pitch, that idea. Designers are good at this, but I think being able to pitch a good idea, a realistic good idea, is a real important skill as you grow your career. And I think that's something that when I was in the middle of my career, I got better at. And now that I'm, more senior, I find that very valuable.
Thank you. Those are really great skills. I'm really grateful for also the examples about how to use them and why they matter for where you are right now. If you guys have any questions about that, pop them in the chat. So I'll come back to one question I had at the end of this, but I did want to ask you a little bit about that's sort of what got you into the role. But I'm curious to know, for where you're sitting now as a director, can you tell us more about how you think about your own career growth? What kind of problems you're focusing on? What kind of skills you're trying to grow?
You want me to give away all my secrets, Julie? Okay, sure. Here's some of the things that I think about when I think about my own career growth. The first one is the incredible importance of relationships and relationship building. As an exercise, if you're listening, one of the things you might try is take a spreadsheet or even just a piece of paper and put your name in the center, and then draw the people that are important in your work around that circle, and put a line between those to show the strength of that relationship. Is that a close relationship, or is it someone that's pretty far away? And you do something like that, and then you have a little map that can allow you to be more mindful about those relationships and maybe see places where you want to strengthen them. Second career growth tip is, I wonder how many of your listeners here have heard of the concept of managing up. The idea that it's important to get to know your manager and where possible, learn from her or him. And so managing up is very important. And I remember when I was getting to know my current manager, I asked him, or he recommended, I can't remember which, we were having a conversation about career growth. And I asked him, what are some of his influences? I had come from this academic background or startup background, and he had not come from that background. And he was really surprising. One of the things that he talked to me a lot about was coaching, like in sports. And he even recommended a book that had inspired him. It's this Phil Jackson book called 11 Rings. Phil Jackson was the famous basketball coach of the Chicago Bulls, Michael Jordan's big team. And it was so interesting to hear him talk about that. And it was very interesting to read that book. And it gave me a perspective both on my manager, his style, and so on. And it also, I just learned a lot that way. So kind of managing up and making the most out of your relationship that you have with your manager. A third tip is, how would I put this? To stay curious. To stay curious about the world. I'll give you an example. Coming to my current role, I didn't know as much as I wanted to about visual design. I had studied industrial design, and visual design is different. And there is an outstanding visual designer on my team, a woman named Veronica, and I really made it. I'm a busy guy, but I really tried to make an effort to spend time with her to really learn more about that role, that profession, the things that make it work, the things that make her so good at that job. And it paid off. I mean, I still have a lot to learn, but staying curious and learning about new parts of your organization is key to, and I think, my career development.
I love these practical examples because I think it's things that everyone at home can also think about as well. Maybe I just kind of have one. Can I have one last question?
Ask me anything.
So I want to hear a little bit about how you think about being in the right place at the right time. It clearly sounds like you've put a lot of work and thinking and preparation into putting in your career. I know for a lot of people put in the work, but sometimes it's hard to kind of make your own luck. So do you have any tips for any like last parting tips for people out here in APAC as they think about their careers or around the world and growing into these kind of positions? Well,
I don't know about changing your luck, but I can think of a tip for people in APAC or EMEA, or really for anyone that finds themselves in a place where they don't have a clear mentor, someone to look up to and model their career path after. You know, in UX, oftentimes you might be the only one at that point in your career, and you're trying to grow, but there's no one out ahead of you to model yourself after. And that's why I would, again, I spoke before about relationship building, but the higher you go in a company, the more you're going to find you actually have in common with other disciplines. So if there's not another UXer that can be a mentor to you, there might be someone from marketing or business or even engineering. The higher you go in your career, I've been surprised to find that a lot of the problems that I have are the same problems that folks in other departments or professions have. So a UX director might have a lot more in common with a product director than you might think. And so my advice is, if you don't have a clear mentor in UX in your area or office or company, ask for mentorship from someone outside your discipline. Because I think that this, especially as you grow into a senior role, the skill set that you're going to need to succeed in that role, there's a lot of commonalities that you'll find there. So that's my advice, my tip.
Thanks, Rob. I really enjoyed hearing about that. And it was a pretty handy exercise you suggested. I think I'm going to try it later. All right, drop in your questions for Rob. And I want to tell you a little bit about our next presenter. Our next presenter is Yanqua. She is the head of product design and user research at NE Digital and NTUC Enterprise, the FairPrice Group. So Yanqua is the head of this group, and she's in charge of digital transformation, thinking about leading digital change across all of NTUC Enterprise and FairPrice Group. Using her leadership and design user research team, they adopted a lot of user-centered practices, problem framing statements, and she even instituted design QA into the development cycle, recently developing UX scorecards that measure design and research impact within the organization. Young is passionate about arts, design, and technology, believing design can change people, improve lives by designing good principles with human-centered design methodologies. She is moved by a deep commitment for human-centered design and a desire to create value that drives growth and positive change. We're really excited to hear from Young. She's going to talk to us a little bit about different phases of our career, particularly focused on the introduction and getting into different parts of UX. All right, with no further ado, over to you, Yang.
Hi, I am Yanqua. Most people call me Yong for short. I'm joining in today to talk about how to grow your career in UX, from starting out to growing your skills to become a leader in your organization. One of the most common statements that I hear from designers after being in their role for 4 to 6 years, they start asking themselves, what's next? Should I become a lead? Should I become a people's manager? Very often when I ask them, what makes a good lead? The answers are not as clear as we all like it to be. If you are at this similar position today, facing similar challenges, I'd like you to take the time out to pause and think and ask yourself these questions, right? In the working context. So what are the things that makes you excited? What are the things, right, that gets your attention, that makes you sit up and listen? What are the things that you enjoy doing over and over again? Is it moving the pixel to that perfect position? Is it getting that positive energy from running design sprint with your working team? At the same time, what are the things, right, that you hated doing and you try to avoid at all costs? And also, it's also important for you to find out what are the things that you don't enjoy doing, but you don't mind doing it. And most important for all, and last of all, is ask people for feedback. Ask people what you're good at and what you suck at. It is really important to find out more about ourselves because it will help you to know where are the areas that you want to build later on, be it for an individual contributor or be it as a people's manager. At the same time, I also like you to start being aware of the various business setup that you are working in. Are you working in an agency or consultancy where work is project-based? In this case, you might or might not have close contact with business stakeholders, decision makers, and you might not have access to developers whenever that you like. Or are you working in a small startup, a one-man team, or a one-man team in the big enterprise where you are required to do everything from interpreting requirements, user stories to design deliveries? Or if you're lucky, you're in a team of 10 or more where there are some form of process and specialization of roles are in place. Being aware of all this is really important because it will help you to identify the skill sets that you need in order to be successful in the various type of organization. At this moment, it might sound pretty abstract. You might want to know more about the specific areas to think about to add on. So to make it more relevant, I'm going to use my own journey as an example. Hopefully this can be food for thoughts for you and help you in your own journey. So for me, I took the classic path, right? And what do I mean by the classic path? So it means that I spent a large part of my career as an individual contributor about 12 to 13 years before moving on to become a people manager. And the challenge or conundrum for me is that during then there is very little clarity in terms of how one might progress in their design career, what makes a good leadership, what it means to be a people's manager. There is very little conversation or information around that. So moving on to look at my early career, back in those days in digital ad agency, the most important part of my job is really to understand the brief, to brainstorm ideas, make the perfect pitch, and do the perfect mock. And as a designer in an agency, it's so important to be able to find inspiration from physical objects to music to design publication. And one of my favorite design publication is called Creative Review, where I love the cover design. This magazine has some of the best collection of top design works. It covers visual com, interactive media to art, and it's really one of the best way to get inspired. And in the early part of the career, I definitely advise strengthening your craft skills. And that means really being able to execute visual design, being able to execute style guide, being able to execute branding, conceptualization, and brainstorming well. This will set a good foundation for your future years ahead as a designer, right? Of course, working in an agency has its pitfalls. Right, one of it is that the agency, you're far away from the development team. There is a clear lack of product ownership, and of course, you don't get to see the end-to-end design, and you don't get to participate in continuous improvement. And this also is one of the reasons that leads me to my next journey with an in-house development team. So I joined Creative Technology as a UX designer. They design and build mobile and audio products. Working in creative tech exposed me to how developers think, speak, and work. For example, I learned to work with tech constraints. I learned to appreciate developers to work with constraints at a tech timeline. And also, it's also here that saw my growth as a UX designer in applying human factor design principle, which I still use it today. For those of you who are not aware of human factors, it's pretty much rooted in ergonomics. It focuses on human behaviors, on how user interacts with the physical world as well with the digital products. And it also focuses on making the system safe and usable. So in fact, human factors is a larger part of the customer experience. I definitely recommend UX designer to have a good gap of human factors knowledge. And this particular book has a huge influence on me. It's my uni module course book. It's called Introduction to Human Factors Engineering. It basically covers the capabilities and limitations of the human operator, both physical and mental, and how we can design system to help people to interact. And this book also covers the general principles of human system interactions design. Right, and it's an excellent reference. So today I'm going to cover some key concepts that is relevant to the UX designer. The first one is physical ergonomics, right? Physical ergonomics basically refers to how the human body interacts responses to physical work demands. For example, there is a huge design implications from using one hand to hold your mobile phone versus two hands to hold your mobile phones. And also one of the key principles in physical ergonomics is really to design for context of use. Right? It is very different when a user uses the mobile device in-house versus uses it outside. Right? And the other principles that I like to share is about consistency. Consistency is how a system should look and work the same throughout. Consistency plays a key role in helping the user to transfer or learn skills to the other parts of the product or even platform. So as an example, designing for iPad, some of the skills that the users have learned can be transferred to a kiosk. Right. The next point is about efficiency. In tech speak, it's basically about reducing friction. In human factors perspective, it is about reducing the user's cognitive load. So some of the tips that this book covers is, breaking down complex tasks into simple steps. Because by doing this, you first reduce complexity. You also have to simplify the decision-making process. And this, in a way, reduce the cognitive load. It also emphasizes heavily on making the interface, making the design easy to understand, easy to learn, and make the interface design guiding the user how to learn. All right. And the other important principles is about error management. The most important part of error management is actually error prevention. And error management covers error preventions, error corrections, and helping users to do service recovery. And very often designers doesn't spend enough time on this project. And some of the tips this book covers is, how do we identify possible points where user might face trouble. So across the user journey, what are the areas that user might face troubles, and how do we protect users or prevent users from fatal errors? And some example of this kind of design is like the undo functions that we see very often in digital. And also having clarity in messages helps customers to do error recovery. And moving on to my next role, after creative technology, I joined OCBC, the bank, as part of the newly formed design team. And this is a milestone because the way of working, the culture is completely different from all my previous roles. Here, I get to work with the business owner very closely. They are subject matter experts. So, I mean, they are expert in explaining how credit loans might work. However, they have difficulty in translating their business requirements to design to digital requirements. And with this, I find myself lacking the soft skills to work effectively. And today, I want to share with everyone some of the key skills that you should also start adopting or acquiring, right? So the first one is asking good questions. Right? Asking good questions helps you to think deeper and also help the other party to think deeper. In a way, it helps to get more clarity. The next one is about acquiring problem-solving techniques such as design thinking. Design thinking is a fantastic toolkit to help you not only to do diverging thinking, but also to converge, right? It helps to move project forward. It instead of spending time on opinions on global debates, use problem-solving technique, right, to help the team to converge, to help the team to come to a decision. And next, skill sets. Stakeholders mapping. Stakeholders mapping is really about knowing who they are, what are their roles, what are their concerns in regards to the context of the project or the work, who they report to. This is really useful when it comes to getting project unstuck, because having a good mapping allows you to know how to navigate the organizations a lot easier. And lastly, learning to speak business, right? A lot of our work is about alignment. A lot of our work is also about getting buy-ins. It is crucial for people to understand you and also for you to help them to understand your work. So it is important to speak their language. We need to articulate how design will have an impact, how design will improve their business, will improve their customers' experience, and what are the business and customer metrics we are looking to improve or to make an impact. So the ability to speak business will help us in creating that mutual understanding. And at this point, you might probably be thinking and being overwhelmed with all the various skill sets that you need to pick up. The good news is that you don't have to pick up everything, right? What I would encourage you to do is to be a T-shaped designer. So if you recall earlier on, I was asking, what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, what you get a lot of energy from, what are the activities that drain your energy. So use this, as a guiding about where you want to grow your skills. What does it mean for you where you're looking to grow yourself in this industry? All right. So what I'd like you to consider is that when you're considering roles, you need to learn to look for and recognize your own maturity level, as well as the organization maturity level which you are currently working for or looking forward to work with. So I like to end off saying that just do whatever that works for you. And always remember, it is okay to switch path. is okay to switch focus. It is okay to try out another track. And it's definitely okay to come back to where you are from. So with this, I'd like to thank you for your time. I hope you'll find something useful from the talk. And thank you so much for staying with me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Young, for that great talk. I really enjoyed hearing a lot of those ideas. Our last presenter for tonight is going to be Randy Hunt. Randy is the head of design at Grab, where he's leading teams of designers, writers, and researchers who are creating a Southeast Asia super app. The Grab's broad design practice, which includes service design, product design, UX research, design operations, design systems, illustrations, and more. The team is striving to use design to understand and serve the needs of customers and lift them up. He has previously served as head of design at Artsy and the VP of design at Etsy. In 2014, Etsy was honored with the Cooper Hewitt National Design Award for Corporate and Institutional Achievement. Randy is an author of Product Design for the Web, so please check out his book, which explores some of the evolving discipline of product design for today's connected world. He also co-founded Supermark, a curated design marketplace, founded Citizen Scholar Incorporated, and worked at Milton Glaser. He is an active writer, lecturer, critic, visiting designer at many colleges and universities. He's originally from Orlando, Florida, and spent 15 years working and living in New York City before moving out here to Singapore in January 2019. He also co-founded a record label, he ran a design firm in Brooklyn, and co-founded an e-commerce marketplace. He spent nearly 8 years leading over at Etsy, and he really knows a lot about scaling businesses and leading large teams. So I hope you'll help me welcome Randy to the conversation tonight as we learn a last piece of understanding UX career development. Over to you, Randy.
Hello there. Hey, so excited to be here today and to get the chance to share with you a bit of perspective. And what I'd like to talk with you about is coming to careers in UX and design from different backgrounds, from backgrounds that might look unconventional, not coming from traditional training in design, user experience, human-computer interaction design, product design, whatever the terminology might be today. I think we all have a sense of which ones feel like they're at the center of the practice and the center of the profession. And if you haven't passed through the center of the profession before, or the educational establishment, you might find yourself or people around you in that situation feeling sometimes, imposter syndrome, a bit uncomfortable, not quite sure if or how to sort of leverage their experience and make themselves relevant in the context of a UX practice. So I just want to share with you a few thoughts about that today. Now, why do I think that's important? I'm actually, overeducated, I suppose, particularly in design. I studied design in undergraduate school, I studied design in graduate school, and I'll tell you what, I don't think either of those things are necessary for the career I've had or the work that I do today. Now, were they helpful? I think they definitely were helpful, but I don't think they were absolutely necessary. And one of the reasons why I believe that's true is the nature of the world that we live and work in today. And I'll speak to that for a moment. And the other is the experiences I've seen and observed as I've hired and built teams, mentored designers early in their careers, and seeing what's possible with people with various backgrounds and experiences, and really not only what's possible, maybe what's required or what it takes to put together diverse teams and the benefit you have from people's diverse experience. Yeah. So I've often held this belief, I'm not even sure where this originated from, but just follow me here. I think it holds up. The way that we're taught, our native language in primary education or something is super foundational, important learning. Right? How to speak, how to read, how to write. And some of us are more proficient at or more comfortable with those things than others. But I think we could all agree that it's a foundational and important skill. Yep. And that, someone may be a poet laureate, someone may be a professional editor, and you may write paragraphs of words to communicate your ideas in a Google Doc. But we're all building from the same core foundational skills. And I think that design is also a language like this. And we should think about it like this fundamental skill that everyone should have. That may sound, utopian or something. I don't mean like everyone's a designer, even though I do think that. What I mean is that the basics of even UX thinking, good typography, visual communication, pacing and time that relates to storytelling. I mean, imagine what happens in the quick storytelling in a TikTok video or something. These are actually how we communicate today in large part. They're probably an extension of other language, but these are all a language, which means we can have a capability in that language at various levels and still put it to good use. So whether you're, authoring the encyclopedia articles or, writing an email to a coworker, you're putting that writing skill to work. I think the same applies with design. So why does this matter if you're coming from an unconventional background? Well, what you feel may be, these really high level advanced skills that you somehow need to get practice in, to be, qualified. I think are actually just fundamental skills that everyone should have around you. So it means they're not that special, but they are very important. And so, go after them. And it also means like a lifelong practice of making those things better. So we have to learn the language though, and you can continuously learn the language and get better at it. Like any other language, reading it, speaking it, writing it, continually will make you better, which is simply about designing and communicating and thinking about users like frequently. It's also important, I was talking with my friend about this concept the other day, and he reflected back to me that, what he said is design isn't the solution, it's a language to express the solution. And I think that's right. So you got to learn the language, but the thinking about what the solution is different and separate. And just the better you exercise that language, you'll have a greater ability to express that solution over time, right? So you got to work on that design language, but there's so much of it. Like, what if you start to learn, in one area, like you're learning about research or human-centered design methods, maybe from a UX course you took or something, or you come from graphic design interest and you start on UI design, or maybe you're interested more in like collaboration methods and workshops. These are all great things to have. Surely more helpful to have them than not have them. But they are not the defining characteristics. Yeah? Because even having all of those things, if you look around the people you might work with, the people you aspire to work with, having those skills is insufficient actually. And being insufficient, not having enough information or not knowing well enough, like I pointed to at the start, is actually what we all experience. The industry and the profession is changing so quickly that the things that we learned as professionals 4, 5, 6 years ago have been replaced by new concepts, new models, definitely new tools. And we are all perpetually in this state of not knowing what's going on around us and figuring it out. So actually, you're closer to that than you realized, right? You already have the challenges of a seasoned professional, which is not knowing. I think that learning to learn is the best meta skill you can develop as a UX professional today. One of the important things here is to understand how you learn. What is your preferred method? Right? Are you a hands-on doer? Do you kind of take things apart to put them back together to understand? Do you need to participate in things? Do you like to be, have content kind of transferred to you in a lecture format? Do you like to read? Do you like to co-learn with other people? It's likely a mix of these methods, but understanding how you learn best and how you take in information best is a really important meta skill, because I promise you, wherever you're coming from, whatever your background, whatever level of UX experience you have or not, you will spend much of your time in the many years ahead figuring out information you don't understand or getting access to data you don't have access to, learning methodologies or developing was a great attribute. And I thought, well, if they explore these concepts, maybe they could adapt in the context of a design organization. Now, it turns out, I took a chance, and I could have as easily been wrong as I was right. But in this case, I'm very thankful that it was, a good chance to take. This person turned into one of the strongest team members we had, ultimately a great manager and leader inside that organization, and now today is a director at one of the, one of the companies you and I probably happily give our money to every month, and no obvious UX experience in their background, and I think it's just such a beautiful version, a beautiful example of exactly how these things can work. So keep an open mind, always be learning, be prepared to learn everything, and build on that design language so that you can express your ideas and your approaches, your solutions with the greatest proficiency possible over time. Yeah. All right. Well, look forward to your questions, and I'm so happy to get to share with you today.
Thanks so much for those insights. That was really helpful. I've said it before, I'll just drop those comments into the question box. We're about to move into our question and answer phase. Another thing you can do to give us some feedback or share your thoughts is we love feedback. You can reach out to us on Twitter or anywhere on social media with #UXEvening. We are coming to the last part of our session here. This is a special time where I'm going to bring all 3 presenters in and we get to answer your questions live. So drop them in, any last questions you might have. This is all about us building a community and talking with each other. So it's really important for you guys to share any last questions you might have. Okay, I really enjoyed all the lecture today, but let's get to the part where we get to get the answers to our burning questions. Let me hold on for a second and I'll go get all the presenters. Well, sorry everybody about the technical problems that we've been having. Luckily, we've got Rob here from YouTube to look into.
Yeah, my bad. Sorry about that. I pulled a plug out here in my basement and you see what happens.
Gotta leave it plugged in, friend. Well, we're really grateful for all the questions that have been coming in. The questions didn't stop in this stream, so if you have any additional questions that you didn't get to ask, or if you want to ask Randy the special tips he added that you didn't get to hear, we will repair the video when we post it live later. But I want to just catch up with you guys and ask a few questions that had come in the question and answer. People really engaged in this, so thank you first off for taking time to put such thoughtful talks together and help everybody think about their UX careers. One topic I think every single person talked about was communication skills and how at different points in your career, communication skills support the use of UX inside of an organization. So I was wondering, thinking about the different phases of career that each of you discussed, could you give the audience a little bit of suggestions about the kind of career skills they should be focusing on at different parts of their career?
Go ahead, Randy.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I think if you're sort of early stages in your career or coming from other disciplines, I'll take that angle. I reiterate a little bit what I shared earlier. I think that actually learning the vocabulary of design, as well as the vocabulary of whomever you are working with or for, so whatever that domain or space is one of the most practical things you can do when it comes to communicating in the professional context, because words have meaning, but words can have multiple meanings. And so it's helpful to understand that we're talking about the same thing when we're talking with people. Pretty complicated concepts we're dealing with. And so you can avoid a lot of confusion and just help sort of grease the wheels of good, productive work. When we
what you look like, do you talk too fast? Do you talk too slow? Do you have these words that you say repeatedly? And it's painful, but that's a really great way to improve your communication skills that really anybody can do.
The probably detail to that, when I was training myself up as a user researcher doing customers interviews, I still remember my first few sessions. I'm so scared, and what I did in order to improve myself, I actually record the way I interview, because we are so conscious of having bias, right, in our own question, and the only way to improve is really have that awareness, and that is also one way of improving communications. And another way is draw. I tend to draw out what the other person is saying, right? And then we can align on the whiteboard. We can align what is the problem to solve. We can align when you say the day is sunny. What do you mean by day is sunny? Does it have clouds? Does it have birds? What it is? Because communication is actually one of my weakest points. So one way I find it's really helpful is get everybody in. If you're not able to express yourself, draw it out, right? It can be stick. I just want to be clear, right? It can be stick. It doesn't matter.
Those are great tips, guys. Thanks. I think maybe one I'll also add to it is like cultivating a sense of storytelling. That's like something in my own career I found to develop that skill. It's not always about creating the great work, but being able to help bring the stakeholders and the audience along on that conversation. So throughout the careers you're thinking about the work, I think communication is definitely a vital one. One we heard a lot of questions around was the transition from school to industry. I think many of us come with backgrounds, specialized or general, related or unrelated to UX. And I would just like to hear about some differences you think about working in UX versus in industry versus work, what you might have experienced in a school environment, and the kind of incentives and rewards some people might want to be aware of. Anyone have thoughts on that?
I'll be the first to say constraints. I think one of the big difference between school and reality, with the work that we do, that is bound to a constraint, but I always tell my team, constraint drive better design. Constraint drive better design. Yeah.
I love that point. Yeah. The constraints of what's possible, and the amount of time, the amount of resources, the money, the interest, those are all different resources around. I don't know if Rob and Randy have any thoughts about the differences between school and industry when you're thinking about the development of your UX career.
From my perspective, I think, well, I didn't study UX in any formal capacity, even though I studied design probably too much. And so I was never really exposed to the academic take on many of the practices that are we consider sort of core or foundational. So I can't speak to those specific differences, but maybe the fact that I haven't had those experiences in an educational context, and that I'm able to successfully deliver value and have a career in the space, is some kind of signal about what is different, or what might be different, which is that they really are like two different environments, and you can bring things from an educational environment for sure. There's tons of value there. But the actual experience in industry it is going to be different. And maybe so the bit of advice I would give is actually to not expect it to be the same. Like, plan for it to be completely different. If your expectation is that the projects or the workshops or the way something went in an educational context will be directly what you apply, you will probably be surprised, disappointed, or frustrated. But if you think that the educational experience you had is actually a collection of life experiences, like anything else, and now you're going to go have some other life experiences, maybe you can learn from some of those things and apply what you learned. But I highly doubt that they follow much, if at all, the structure you learned in an educational context.
Yeah, I would just add to that point that, the fact that UX is such a messy field can be, I guess, a turnoff for some people, but I love it. Like, I love the fact that it's so cross-disciplinary, and that you're bringing in skills, or as Randy put it, life experiences, The entrepreneurial side of it, the pitch side of it, the craft side of it, they're all really interesting. The research, really interesting. And so I think good UXers are sort of, in general, curious about the world and kind of cobbling together a collection of things. And the best UXers that I know and work with and that are my colleagues are that way. So you have to get a little bit comfortable with the fact that you can't go take a course, graduate, get a job. It's not sort of that traditional, at least today, career path for many of us. And so if you're noticing that and that's making you uncomfortable, it's okay. Like that's how we all have felt, I think. That's just part of the UX profession.
Thanks, guys. That sounds really good. And Rob, maybe if you can just add it on. There was a couple questions that came in about transitioning with the PhD, because I know we have a lot of people.
Yeah, I saw a couple of those, and I've been trying to respond to them. People ask, like, was it worth it to get a PhD, or was it just a waste of 6 years of my life? The answer I always say is no. It was really worth it to get the PhD, because as Randy was talking about earlier, it really taught me a lot about learning. And I find myself applying the same rigorous study of topic X. My PhD is on a topic called design fixation, and I don't study that anymore. But the way that I had to learn about design fixation is the same way that I've had to learn about visual design or areas of research or anything else. And so that part has been great. There was a couple of questions about people saying, "Hey, well, I've been told I'm overqualified in job interviews and things like that," and I actually have heard that from other colleagues of mine as well. What I would say to that is consider what you're emphasizing in your career. If you're lucky enough, like me, I've had a fairly long career, a lot of different experiences, but I'm selective about which of those experiences I'm emphasizing depending on my audience, whether it's this audience or an interview panel. So, I think a mistake people make is they try and say in an interview, here's everything that I've done. Whereas a little editing could make that a very compelling story. Julie, you were talking about storytelling. And so, don't feel like you have to talk about everything equally. Paint a picture of who you want to be with that company.
That's a great tip. Thanks for addressing that. Another one, just to add on to this for everyone to also reply to, was about portfolios. This is quite a hot topic for non-designers, and I know designers have for a long time been talking about portfolios. Do you have any advice or suggestions for people as they think about creating a portfolio and telling that story about their body of work?
I think some of the suggestion is to work for free or get a short-term internship. I think that's the best way to practice. That is one, to get exposure to an organization, or even if it's a freelance work, there is a lot to be learned as a freelancer, because you have to negotiate, you have to make the client to understand what's the problem you're trying to solve, help them to solve. So I think there's a lot of value in just getting your hands dirty and build that portfolio, and of course go out and meet people. You never know, whoever that you meet in those meetups might have brilliant opportunities as well. Yeah.
Thanks, Cal. All right, my kind of last question here, Johnny and several of the people in the chat were really curious to hear about. You guys all work for pretty big companies. Do you have any tips for people working at a smaller company? Maybe they're a solo UXer on a very small team. How can they think about their career development in a structured way, like you guys have presented at the different phases of your career? Does that advice change or modify in any way based on that factor?
I can start here. I think there's real advantages to working at big companies and real advantages to working at small companies. And so my advice would be to take advantage of those advantages, if you will. So at a small company, you get to wear all the hats, right? You get to do all the things, and that's so exciting. So you can be, a UX researcher, you can be a UX designer, you can be the company's expert on visual design, you can be building prototypes the way a UX engineer might. All of those things, all those experiences. So you should try and capitalize on the fact that you're able to do that, because at a larger company, there's more specialized roles. I don't know, Randy, I see you nodding. Do you agree?
Yeah, I very much agree with that. I think that the kind of multi-hat experience is just really valuable experience to have in general, and I think depending on how small that company is, right, you might find yourself wearing hats outside of what you might consider UX or design, and I would encourage anyone to do so. It's just really valuable skills, makes you appreciate other people's roles and responsibilities. As you get into other environments, you kind of empathize with what they're adding to an organization as well.
Yeah, that's I think a great point, is that like when you have that opportunity to try different things out, you can always sort of find the time and the pacing for yourself to schedule growth and opportunities that you guys mentioned. I think the list of questions that were called out earlier, the attendance, the reading, I would definitely encourage people to go back to the video after this and get a chance to really take some time, like a block of time to carve out to work on those. Because regardless of where you work or what you're thinking about your UX career now, whether you're just coming in or you've been at it a while, we're all on this path together about learning and growing. Hopefully you've met people in this chat today also. A great conversation that went on. If anybody wants to connect outside, please, let people know if there's interest in that. We're really trying to build a platform for people to connect, especially out here in Asia Pacific. All right, those are all the big questions I had for the speakers today. Thank you so much again for your thoughtful answers to our questions, for the great talks that you gave. To the audience, I just want to say this is a quarterly event. We'll be back on YouTube Live next quarter, so please do subscribe to the Google Design channel to follow along with us. And one thing I'd really like to say is a huge thank you to the really large Google team that put this event together. They've done an incredible job, and very grateful to you for all the work and contributions that everybody's put in. This is a huge team activity that makes this possible for you guys. So if anyone has feedback or ideas or comments, we'll be writing you afterwards if you registered through our website, and we'd love to hear about that. Also, if you have any suggestions for other speakers that you think would be great, that you'd like to hear from, or topics you'd like to know about, we really read all the comments, so we'd love to hear your suggestions and feedback. And just on a closing note, I'm wishing you guys a really great year ahead. This is the first quarter, the first event of the year, and I think we should all take that as an opportunity to set a path for ourselves, intentional with all the changes the world's seen, to really give ourselves self-care and growth in the year ahead. So thank you to everyone on the call. Thank you to the Google team, and thank you so much for dialing in tonight. We hope this was a helpful session of UX Evenings at Google. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.